Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Oh, Miles here.
Your Owl Post for the week is freshly delivered, and I am just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and with me, as she is always, I would say the quite comfortable Andrea Coffman.
Yeah, I'm having a tough day here, guys.
You know, anytime you can podcast from a lying position is, I envy you, because my setup would not allow that, so that's fantastic.
I should. I mean, I just don't have anywhere to settle my stuff up right now while we're, between houses. But, it's been a tough day, so I'm definitely, in a nice reclined position right now.
Well, you should be, because we got 2 brand new reviews over there on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever you want to call it these days. And they're both 5 stars, Drea. One of them says a podcast for casual and hardcore Harry Potter fans alike, 5 stars. Shanester85 says, found this podcast 2 weeks ago, and now I'm on episode 36, so I can't wait to catch up. Hopefully I'm in time to listen to the last couple of episodes when they come out. Absolutely love this podcast and can't recommend it enough. Listen every day while prepping for my restaurant job. Love you guys. Well, you know what? We love you back. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening and giving people a reason to want to listen by calling us awesome. So thank you so much.
And thanks for binging 36 episodes in 2 weeks. That is impressive. That's impressive.
That's a lot of my voice. I'm so sorry.
Right. That's a lot of random talk about being pregnant. I'm so sorry.
Well, you're not pregnant anymore, so once they catch up to this point,
then they'll figure that
know.
Out.
Yeah.
They binged my whole 9-month pregnancy in 3 weeks.
If only your pregnancy had been that short.
If only I could have binged my pregnancy.
Oh, man. Well, the next review we had says, bloody brilliant. 5 stars. It's J.K. Otis, and they said, I love this podcast. I'm listening to the 3rd book, and so it's so much fun. I listen to it while I go on walks with my baby, and it's so great. They talk about the things that I've totally overlooked in the past, and so nice to hear a new perspective. Love, love, love it. That's 3 loves. I feel like that they're trying to tell us something, Drea. So Thank you for loving our podcast. Oh my gosh. Getting this effusive praise, I'm not quite sure what to do with myself.
I am just jealous that they live in a place where they can actually set foot outdoors with their child. It's not a scorching hellhole like Phoenix.
This is true. Although I do have to say, as of this recording, I had been in Phoenix, the weather was actually wonderful outside. I was outside almost all weekend, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, we're having a very strange summer start right now. The hottest it's been lately has been 95 degrees, and it's been spotty on that at most. Some days I still have to wear a coat in the morning. I mean, it's just, I'm not prepared for the barrage of heat we're going to get here any day now. But yeah, anyway.
Well, it's nice that, you haven't had to suffer quite yet, even though it's probably coming.
And it's almost as nice as getting another 5-star review. So we super appreciate that.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for all the 5-star reviews there. Keep them coming over on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. Hit us up with your thoughts about what you think of the show. And we really appreciate it because it helps other people find the show. And because there's a lot of other Harry Potter podcasts out there. So if you like us, let us know. And we'll, here, we read out all the reviews we get on the show as well. So you'll get the shout out. You could be internet famous.
I could make it all about me and talk about my pregnancy or how hot it is where I live again. I mean, look at all you're missing out on, guys.
You can also find us on Twitter at Join Nerd Party or on Facebook at facebook.com/The Nerd Party. You can also find us online at thenerdparty.com. We have so many different podcasts here on the Nerd Party that you should be checking out. So all of those places are great places to follow and like and check out. And then maybe you'd like to send us an email. You can go to thenerdparty.com/contact, choose a show, choose Owlpost, and that comes to Drea and I. We always appreciate hearing what people have to think of the show. So this week, it's chapter 26, Drea. And we're on episode 120, which is kind of cool. And we have seen and unforeseen. So there is a lot that kind of goes down in this chapter. And I really like that they haven't been sure, when this article is going to come out. But that Harry just feels good having gotten a chance to talk about it because he's just had this burning desire to do something. And I think just this very beginning here, it's like the second paragraph of the chapter, I think that sums up Harry perfectly. Like, he just wants to do something. He wants to do something good, in the face of evil. And that's Harry Potter as a character in a nutshell. So I kind of like that we get reminded of just Harry's heart here at the very beginning of the chapter.
Well, and I also think, it's a good summation of him and his journey because it's just, he knows like there's so much he can't control of what's happening right now, but giving this interview and seeing the results of it is within his control, right? Like that's something that he can make a direct impact on. And so he's going to do that because he can. And I think that's also kind of a good lesson for us to take from him too, is like, he can't control Umbridge. He can't control that they got kicked off Quidditch. He can't control, all of these things going on. But so instead of focusing and fixating on that, he decides to do something that he does have control over. And so I think that's, part of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What I also love is before we get the release of the article, we finally get Harry and Hermione kind of talking through what happened at Hogsmeade, and Harry kind of confessing everything that went down with Cho. And this is just one of the most funny conversations in the entire book, and I would say probably the entire series in general, just the conversation between Harry and Hermione, because she starts kind of explaining about, and it, like, when she says, "Oh, Harry," I mean, you just expect her to be like, "Bless your little heart," like that's basically
she has like
what
an
she's
old
saying.
lady approach to this.
And I love how she just, lays out everything that went wrong with everything that happened. And, Harry's just dumbfounded because, he doesn't get it. And it's kind of so true to life, to relationships of that age, where you just don't understand enough of the nonverbal cues from the opposite sex yet. And obviously it goes to Harry's inexperience in general of, not like we've mentioned, nobody's modeled this for him either. So it's not like he has no foundation whatsoever. And so I love this conversation.
I love that she's the one to clue him in. I love that she decides to like she kind of follows up on that. I love that he shares that and is kind of at a loss. I actually think it's really cute that they ask Hermione, like, you should write a book on how to do this. Like, I think it's just kind of an endearing thing. And I appreciate that it's like, yeah, it would have made more sense if she'd said it this other way, but, girls don't always do that. Like, it was a very kind of like logical approach to something that's really, I think, kind of something every teenage girl and boy go through. It's just this lack of connection and how they communicate being so different. And I just think it's so cute. And I love that relationship exists where Harry can get that advice from someone like Hermione or Ginny, because not everyone is fortunate enough to have a friend who, a friend of the opposite sex who can kind of give a little bit of insight. So, it was pretty cute.
Yeah, I agree with you. What I really loved was when she was like, "You're worse than Ron." Well, okay, you're not you're not worse than Ron. And then she just kind of sighs, and it's just like, it's so funny. And yeah, the fact that they want her to write a book, I thought that sounds like a brilliant idea for Hermione to write a book for teenage boys, how to understand girls. It would be fantastic. And they could all use it. So at this moment too, they're interrupted by Ron and Ginny coming back from Quidditch practice, and apparently Quidditch practice was awful.
Yeah, it sounds like it did not go well at all. And I love though that the fact that it's not going well is kind of is depicted by them kind of just covered in mud. I feel like that just has such a defeatist perspective. Like it just gives you this visual that feels so defeatist right out of the gate.
Well, and it's funny here because what's really going wrong is that the two beaters that they've replaced Fred and George with are not great. And then apparently Ron is having still a very hard time in goal and not doing a great job as keeper.
Well, and that's all confidence-based, right? Like everything else is going to pot, so he sort of loses his focus and his confidence. So it's like kind of a compounding problem.
But the one good thing is apparently Ginny's pretty good as seeker.
And I do love that this is another moment for Hermione, right? Like Fred and George are like, I don't know how she got to be so good on the broom. Like we didn't even let her play with us when we were a kid. And she's like, no, she just waited till you guys left and took your brooms out on her own and did it herself. Like clearly Ginny has shared this with Hermione and not her brothers. And she kind of clues them in. And they're like, yep, that would do it. Yep, that would do it.
That makes sense. Okay, now I get it. No, I love that. And I think one of the things that's so great about it is that it lets you in a little bit on Ginny's character and what her character is, which is one that's not going to be put down and one that's going to take what she wants. If she wants to learn how to play Quidditch, well, by golly, she's going to learn how to play Quidditch, whether you want her to play or not. And it's actually paid off for them here because, Ginny's pretty good.
Well, and I love that we get this little tiny insight into the relationship that Ginny and Hermione get to have, and because we don't see that ever, right? Because that's not really about our main protagonist. So we don't get a lot of time with the two of them alone focus on that relationship. So we get this tiny little insight into what it's like between Hermione and Ginny, that she's comfortable sharing that and talking about that, and that's clearly something that they have discussed, and I love that.
Yeah, I do too. Well, and what it goes to show is that there's those times when they're at the Burrow or whatever that they're hanging out together. Hermione doesn't just hang out with the boys. She'll hang out with Ginny too, and they've become friends, and so it creates a nice relationship there, like you said. Because of the structure of the story here, you don't get to see that, but it's alluded to, and it's apparently something that's really strong. And so this is another Hermione moment, though, where it's interesting, where she brings up an interesting point, but it's also something that she can't understand. She does not get Quidditch. She doesn't get sports, and she feels like it's something that just breaks apart the school because it creates this tension. And, there's a point in some of that because, competition can go badly and it can create some bad friction. But healthy competition can also be a good thing too. And so, but it's just not something that she gets, even though Hermione herself is very competitive, especially when it comes to, say, learning, and she would never say that was bad. And so she just can't quite see the validity in something like sports.
Yeah, she doesn't see the value it brings because, she is so used to things being, like to her, there's no educational value, or there's very little educational value in sports. And which is interesting considering that she, of all people, sort of made a new relationship because sports brought them together. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's interesting. I can kind of relate. I don't particularly care for it, but that doesn't mean that I don't see the value in it. I just don't I don't feel like I need that value in my life because I'm the same. We don't really watch any kind of sport or anything like that. But that doesn't mean there's not value to it. It's just different. It's just not intellectual value usually. And I'm going to hear about this, but whatever. There's teamwork value, and there is a healthy competition, and there is pushing yourself and driving, and all of that does have value. It's just not what, it's just not what Hermione values.
Right. And I mean, like you said, there's a whole other side of it when it comes to the idea of teamwork and camaraderie and something that can bring you together with a purpose and a cause and everything like that she just doesn't quite understand. And I think what is great here is that Rowling does a good job of kind of showing both sides, and that neither one is necessarily right or wrong. They just come at it from different angles. Yeah, and it's something, again, it's just not something that Hermione can understand. And we have a Quidditch game in this chapter, although we don't see it. We only hear about it, and apparently it's awful. Gryffindor just gets demolished by Hufflepuff. I mean, it really is embarrassing for them as a team. But it does lead to a moment that I really love, and again, it involves Ginny, when Harry talks to her about the fact that she caught the snitch, and he's like, hey, good catch. She's like saying that she was just lucky, and anyway, I'm just holding your spot until you get back. And he's like, I have a lifelong ban. And she's like, well, you're only banned until, Umbridge leaves the school. She's like, but, I'd rather play chaser anyway. So I'm hoping to be able to take Angelina or Alicia's spots once they leave next year, because I'd rather goal score. And it's just kind of this really nice moment where it's like, it's one of those moments where I really appreciate that Harry and Ginny get each other. They're able to have, like, we saw earlier, Cho and Harry getting to bond over Quidditch. And so here, we also see Harry and Ginny getting a chance to bond in a new way over something that they both really love.
It is. It's a very Ginny heavy chapter here at the beginning.
It's kind of nice. Like, I feel like this, we've talked about it before, but this book is really giving us more of these characters. And two of the characters we're getting to know are, Ginny and Neville. And it's been a lot of fun. And I think it's interesting because, Harry is just, it's kind of a frustrating thing for him. And he's going to bed and he's thinking about it and he's thinking, Ginny was great, but he's like, I know I could have caught the snitch sooner. And then you just feel really bad because he falls asleep and he has another one of these dreams where he's walking towards this door and he almost feels like he's going to get in the door finally. And then Ron gives this like rasping snore and Harry is awakened and he doesn't get to see what's in this door. But it's another one of those moments where, like these dreams that Harry keeps having, it almost feels like it's about to go somewhere, and then we just get the door slammed on us by Ron snoring really loud. Which
is, as the reader, I was kind of like, oh, good, we know he shouldn't be doing this. We want to know what's happening. But at the same time, we know it's not good for Harry to do that. So we're like, no.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too because they wake up in the morning and Harry starts getting all of this owl post, and it's all, being sent to him, and it's happened. The Quibbler is out. Harry Potter speaks out at last, and everybody is reading it. And apparently people have already read it and are now sending Harry either hate mail or fan mail.
Well, we learn a little later in the chapter that the story actually released yesterday, or the day before in the book, and that, he was sent a copy the day after. So people had a day to read and then respond to this article. And I love that Umbridge catches them with all this mail, right? And and he sort of throws a copy of the Quibbler at her, and she bans him from any future Hogsmeade visits because that's when he gave the interview. Because I honestly like you could have lied and said you did it like via scroll. Like you could have found a way to not lose your Hogsmeade privileges, but whatever, it's fine. And she puts another, educational decree out that anyone caught with copies of the Quibbler will be punished, I think. I don't know. It's not allowed.
Oh yeah, they're gonna get in trouble.
Yeah,
big time.
You're not allowed to have a copy of the Quibbler anymore. And Hermione is so pleased. And when they ask her about why she's so pleased, she's like, well, there's no faster way to get everyone at Hogwarts to read the interview than by telling them they're not allowed to read the interview. I just love that theory. It's almost like she's so pleased it played into her plan. And it was absolutely right. By the end of the day, everyone at school had read it and was talking to Harry, and he converted so many people to his side. And I love that.
I absolutely adored the way that this plays out, and it is pretty funny, Hermione's giddiness at the fact of what's happening. That Umbridge is Hermione kind of feels like a Palpatine here, where she's just like laying all the seeds and like everybody's playing into her plan. It's fantastic,
perfectly.
I love that Ron is helping Harry open all of this fan mail, and he's like, oh, this one says you converted her, and she sent you a picture. Oh, wow. Like, it's like real awkward there for a moment. Like, apparently women are now sending Harry interesting pictures
underage
of
wizard pictures.
Yes.
Like, so gross and creepy.
Oh, it's so disturbing.
That's like Game of Thrones level creepy right there.
It is some Game of Thrones level creepy right there. Luckily, she doesn't go any further with that. So
we all thank you for that. JK, we all thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much. I also love that all of the teachers are treating Harry with respect. Obviously not Snape, but, Sprout gives him like 20 points just for handing her the water can. And Flitwick gives him some squeaking sugar mice, which sounds kind of strange.
Imagine they're a candy of some sort, like chocolate frogs.
Yes. Well, and then Trelawney breaks into sobs and announces that Harry's not going to suffer an early death, but lived on a ripe old age and become the Minister of Magic and have 12 children.
I love it. Because she loves to predict how often he's going to die. So I love that her gift is that now he doesn't die.
Yes.
Yeah,
it was brilliant.
I think it was brilliant. So smart. It was such a good, it's a good win. Like we're at the point in this book where we've had so much like dreariness and so many things kind of taken away from us that we needed a win. Even if it's small, we needed a win.
Well, and Harry kind of gets a win here too, because as we talked about in this chapter, he was telling Hermione about how awful it went with Cho, but she approaches him and says how sorry she was about what happened and that the interview was so brave, it made her cry. And Harry's like, dang it, I keep making her cry, but I'm glad she's not mad at me anymore.
I do love that. There's actually two parts to this I really love. I love that he's able to convert Seamus in this whole thing. And that, he comes around and he's like, hey, I totally believe you, man. I sent a copy to my mom. Like you've got my support. And it kind of like re-rallies around him, right? Because that started out rough and has kind of added a lot of stressors to his life. And I love that he called out the parents of some pretty prominent Slytherins. And I love that he's just like, and they can't do anything about it without admitting or breaking an educational decree. And so, they'd have to admit that they had read it, and they'd have to admit that, they'd have to participate, and it totally puts them at a disadvantage. And I love that that's what happens.
Yes, I 100% agree, and I love that. And not only that, but Luna tells them the good news that this is the only issue that's ever sold out and is going into a reprinting. So this is news that is spreading across the wizarding world now in a way that it hadn't been before. And it's actually, it's having the impact that Hermione was hoping for, which is to kind of turn the tide of public opinion maybe towards Harry by finally doing some actual journalism where we interview the source and just print what they said and allow people then to make up their own minds whether they want to believe them or not, which is great to see.
not just that, but it was the perfect time. Like, everyone was desperately in need of some information, and the fact that these Death Eaters had escaped so long ago and hadn't been captured yet, like, it was like the perfect time for this to come out to. Any earlier and it wouldn't have been as impactful, and much later it might not have been as impactful. Like, Hermione timed this perfectly.
Yeah, she absolutely did. And it goes to show just how smart Hermione really is. And
a little bit of luck in there too. Very smart.
That's true.
And has a little bit of luck on her side. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I think, I think that's a really important thing to mention, is the fact that, yes, Hermione did this, right? And it's a really smart idea, and it's really working out. But like you said, it's not just Hermione being smart. There's no way she could have anticipated that everything would work out this well. And so, like you said, yes, there is a little bit of luck involved. But, it's kind of cool to see that the way that these kids have been living their lives by, not denigrating people that other people would, like Luna and her father, have allowed them to be able to get their part of the story out. I mean, it just goes to show a different way, and we're really seeing the byproduct of them living a totally different type of life that doesn't need to put people under labels or in a box or use them to partner with them. It makes a huge difference. Well, and so I really appreciate
it's not
that.
even like that they get to partner with them. Like, these people want to help them. Like, they build what I like to think of as this strong followership that wants them to do these things and wants to do what they can. And not only have they kind of converted friends, they've converted people who want to help them accomplish these goals, which is a completely different way. It's like almost the complete opposite of when you think about Voldemort, who's scaring people and who are only doing things because they're afraid of what he'll do. This is the opposite. People want to do these things for him. So it's a very different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I think that, that's what we're supposed to see. This book is kind of setting up the juxtaposition between the two different sides. And it's doing such an effective job of that by just this alone, of really seeing people working with other people instead of using other people. Yeah, and so sadly for Harry, the festivities of the common room, where he is a hero and big signs have been put up, don't last too long, because when he goes to sleep that night, he basically starts dreaming immediately. And this time in the dream, he's not the snake. He's actually Voldemort, who is talking to one of his followers, Rookwood, and they learn some really important information here about what Voldemort has been doing trying to get to this weapon, and just how close they actually are to getting this weapon.
And it's one of those things where I feel like Harry's pride gets in the way, because, he's not supposed to do this. He's not supposed to learn this. And instead of owning that and fessing up and taking it to the adults, if you will, he kind of sweeps it under the rug and tries to hide it and pretend like he doesn't know anything and he doesn't see anything and that they're not going to tell anyone. Even though both Dean and Seamus even were like, we should tell. No, we're not going to tell anyone, right? And then it all kind of comes out in his occlumency lesson with Snape. And Snape is kind of like, you're not supposed to be doing that. But he wanted to know more, right? So it's interesting, but it does tell us a lot about and explain a few things that's happened since the beginning of the book, including someone they thought being an ally being arrested and thrown in Azkaban for attempting to, break into the Department of Mysteries. And the person who was murdered in the hospital bed, it explains that as well.
Yeah, we find that Avery had told them that Bode would have been able to remove this item wherever it is, and the fact that Rookwood used to work there, and but he would never have been able to take it. The fact that Malfoy had him under the Imperious Curse to try and do this. And so when Harry and Ron are talking about this, that Avery is in big trouble for what he, giving wrong information to Voldemort in the end, and that now Rookwood's going to help him. And so when they're telling her, like you said, they're not going to tell Dumbledore, but Ron and Harry do tell Hermione exactly what's been happening. And this is where we kind of put all those pieces together. Bode had been killed in St. Mungo's, and the reason they did that is because they couldn't have him talking because he had been under the Imperious Curse. And that Lucius Malfoy being kind of a key in all this, he's been hanging around the Ministry all this time, and they put all of it together that he's also the reason that Sturgis Podmore is missing as well. And so all of these things go together, and like you said, Hermione kind of confronts Harry. He's like, but you shouldn't be learning this. Like, you shouldn't be learning this stuff. And I don't know if it's Harry's pride that this is, at least on the occlumency side, because I'm with Harry, at least at this point in the book, like, it's just not working. He's trying to learn this, but it doesn't actually seem to be helping. And in fact, it seems to him, at least, like it's just kind of cracked his mind wide open and made it even harder to keep it close to the Dark Lord. I mean, the moment he goes to sleep these days, he just automatically is already dreaming, it seems like. So
I always thought of it as a pride perspective, though, that he feels kind of like he's being sidelined or shunned by Dumbledore. And so the pride of having to go to Dumbledore and tell him, like, hey, I didn't listen to what you asked me to do, but here I want to tell you this, and have him sort of like feel dejected and ignored again, even though at this point we know there's a pretty valid reason for it, right? I just think that I feel like there's this pride element where he doesn't want to have to deal with this feeling of being ignored by Dumbledore again. And so he doesn't want to share it because he just doesn't want to deal with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that reading, but it's definitely an interesting perspective. Something I'm going to have to think about as we're reading, further for sure. I always took these interactions that he's been not having with Dumbledore as like he's less likely to talk to him now because he doesn't get the impression that Dumbledore wants him to talk to him anymore. Like, right. And so he doesn't want to take him this information because Dumbledore doesn't want to talk to him anyway. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, no, I get that part. I don't know if that's pride. I think that might be more like, what would that be?
I just don't think he wants to be rejected again. I just don't think he wants to deal with that again.
And a fear of rejection is not necessarily pride.
Not necessarily, but that description is generally how I read this section. And any time that he doesn't, we have this breakdown in communication, right? Like, especially in this book, that's exactly how I'm sort of reading all this. And that, to me, that's why he doesn't want to go and tell him anyone, really.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that part I can totally agree with you, is that I think he feels as though in many ways Dumbledore has kind of rejected him and he doesn't know why. And like you said, it's because of this lack of communication between them, which...
Well, we kind of know why, right? Like, we kind of know that the Dark Lord can read his mind, can supposedly read his mind, and that the last time he was around Dumbledore, he got this, like, seething anger. Like, there's enough pieces there that you would think he'd be able to put it together, but this is one of those moments where I think his emotions are clouding his judgment, which does not happen often for him. But this is definitely one of those situations where it happens to him, especially in the entire book.
Yeah. Well, and... I think that part of that is that the person teaching him occlumency is Snape.
Yeah,
and
that
help. Clouds everything as well. Because it's not helping the situation, because those two just kind of bicker at each other.
And he doesn't have faith that he's trying to do what's right by him, right? He hasn't earned that privilege the same way like Lupin did in the book, where he kind of taught him defense against the dark arts. Like he picked that up more quickly because he trusted his teacher, and he doesn't have that trust established with Snape. And even though he wants to try, he still sort of has this doubt that he's in this for the greater good.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, this all comes to the head when they were having their lesson, and the fact that they keep going down this corridor. And one of these moments where Snape is trying to get into his memory, he actually opens the door. And the door opens, and he's never seen that before. And he does kind of lie to Snape here and say that he's only had one, dream, and it's just been about this door. And Snape, challenges him on that. Like, do you think you're special? Like, do you think you are, like, just because you're having these dreams, does that make you special, Potter? And which does not help the situation.
Well, no, and he kind of challenges him, like, are you not working at this because this makes you feel special and you want to keep this connection, right? Even though it's dangerous, like, are you doing this for immature and selfish reasons when really he just doesn't know how it's so strong, he doesn't know how to fight it. But there's an interesting moment here where he actually gets inside Snape's head for a very brief period of time. Before we're sort of interrupted by this woman's screams.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really important moment because Harry gets a peek at a memory of Snape's, and it's not a good memory, because what we see is a boy, much like Harry, kind of alone in a dark room, and a girl laughing at him.
A girl and a boy laughing at him, I think.
Right. And so it's not a great memory. I mean, we kind of see that Snape has a pretty tragic past, and in many ways it's pretty similar to the way that Harry was raised, honestly.
Yeah, and what's interesting is this is the difference between the book and the movie, is that Snape doesn't instantly shut him down and kind of chastise him for doing that, which is kind of part of occupancy that we haven't gotten to, is also going into the other person's mind intentionally, right? That's more the offensive side of things that he didn't really intend to learn. But instead, he comes out and he's just like, I didn't tell you to use that spell, but it works. So good job. Like, he actually kind of pays him a little bit of a compliment, instead of just shutting down and running away. He sort of does the correct thing you'd want to see here and encourages him to do something great again, which is unique. And I feel like going to yield a better result in the long run anyway, the outcome of the movie.
Well, and they try again, and this is the moment where the door finally opens in Harry's memory, and he's awoken and he's on his back again, and Snape is about to lay into him about,
where have you
what
seen
this is
what
and
is
everything.
This from?
Yeah, and they immediately get interrupted instead, where they hear this woman screaming and crying, and Snape's like, was there anything wrong, unusual, like on your, like, it's so weird because they both kind of stop where they are in this moment of like anger towards each other and like, what is going on out there?
They both sort of draw their wands sort of and are like, what the?
And it turns out that, Professor Trelawney has been fired from her job as a professor here at the school, and she's being kicked out of the school by Umbridge and sacked in front of everybody. Trelawney's not helping, as, she seems to be a little bit drunk at this moment on some of the cooking sherry and making an even bigger scene of it all. And Umbridge is loving every single minute of it.
Well, and she's like, didn't you see this coming? And blah, blah, blah. And, Trelawney's point of like, this has been my home for like 16 years. Like, how can you just send me away? And I do love how McGonagall is doing everything she can to sort of comfort Sybil and is like, we're not sending you anywhere. You're not going anywhere. Calm down. and Umbridge is like, no, she is. She's leaving. And I do love how this is true to the movie, but I do love how Dumbledore sort of steps in and says, like, no, she doesn't have to leave. Like, you can't force her to leave. You just cannot use her as a teacher anymore. Like, I'm the only one who can banish someone from Hogwarts. And then different from the movie, he kind of names her replacement right out of the gate, which does not, we don't actually get this character in the movie at all.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I also like beyond this, that the book does that the movie doesn't here is another thing where Dumbledore is playing this very cool. Mm-hmm. He's kind of got a smile on his face. She's playing
not breaking
this.
Him. Yeah.
No, not at all. And that's something that I think the movie gets wrong about Dumbledore is that he doesn't get frazzled the way they have him in the movie. He totally plays this cool. And it's unnerving to Umbridge here that she can't get under his skin the way she wants to. And yes, I love that he immediately announces the successor, and he's like, she says, you don't get to do that. And he says, no, the rules actually say, so he plays her same game, that the ministry has the right to appoint a suitable candidate if and only if the headmaster can't find a suitable replacement. And they introduce the new teacher, which is going to be, something that poor Umbridge can't stand, which is, as she would say it, a near magical creature, a centaur, and it's Firenze, which is fantastic. Like, just what a win.
Agreed. And I love how I feel like Dumbledore is just the most strategic wizard mofo that has ever existed. He is 3 moves ahead of her. He knows exactly what to do. He knows to stay calm. Like, he is like strategy goals in this chapter.
Yeah, he's pretty boss, honestly,
He's
in this
very
chapter.
Boss.
Yeah, it's so awesome.
There's a reason why he is in the position and has all of those hundreds of titles he used to have that he has.
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason behind that.
It's awesome. And I love that that's the way the chapter ends. And so we kind of will have to wait to see, what comes next here.
What new magical decree we're going to
get. So next week, chapter 27, as I said, the Centaur and the Sneak. Before we get there, though, Drea, as people may be listening to the episode or binging through them, where can people find you if they want to catch up with you and see how life is going?
Yeah, sure. You can find me on Twitter at PCFchick or on Instagram at Drea Coffman. You can also check out a friend of mine here in Phoenix has a podcast, Most Excellent 80s Movies podcast. And I joined her and a friend to talk about The Never Ending Story a few weeks ago.
Nice.
So if that's something you'd be interested in, you can find that on all of the various podcasting places that Matthew will list off here very shortly.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's another place you can kind of check me out.
Perfect. Well, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd under the name MattRushing02. I'm here on the network doing Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills as we talk about Star Wars each and every week. I'm on the Trek FM network talking about 2 different things. A lot of different things, but one of the shows is solely on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and that's called The Orb. You can also find me doing the 602 Club, where we talk about all of the fandoms that we love, not just one, because we just don't like to be limited like that. And so I hope you'll join us there. And then last but not least, I'm doing a show called Cinema Stories with my good friend Courtney, and that's where we talk about films, but through the lens of faith. But we want to say thank you so much for checking your Outpost.
Mischief managed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.